Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you're following business or investment or even public policy these days, you can't really avoid ESG, environmental, social governance. It's really shifted beyond just being a buzzword.
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty much become a non-negotiable thing for, sustainable management. It's how corporations are judged now, fundamentally.
So it's this critical metric everywhere else.
Yeah, globally, definitely. Institutional investors. They are laser-focused on ESG scores. It's not just fluff. These scores genuinely sway huge investment decisions. And frankly, they impact whether a company is even seen as, viable today.
Okay, so big money, big decisions hinge on this survival, essentially.
That's the picture globally. But then you look closer to home, say domestically, places like South Korea, for instance, and there's often a bit of a disconnect.
How so?
Well, public awareness about ESG is definitely high. People know the term. But the actual doing of it often seems stuck at the level of these big, glossy corporate reports.
Ah, the sustainability reports. Right. And that feeds into this criticism we've seen mentioned, doesn't it? That maybe some local efforts are a bit showmanship.
Exactly that word. Activities that maybe look good for the company image right now, but don't necessarily lead to deep systemic change.
So there's this gap, a gap between the big idea ESG and the small practical things people can actually do every day.
Precisely. We don't have many models out there showing how to connect those two things effectively.
Which actually brings us to why we're doing this deep dive today. We stumbled upon a really powerful counterexample, a model that shows ESG could be built from the ground up. We're going to explore the work of a student-led group called the ACTizen team from Salt International School.
Yeah, this team really decided to tackle that abstraction problem head-on, to turn ESG into something concrete, something you could actually measure in daily life. And their name, ACTizen, it's pretty telling, right? Action plus citizen.
Active citizenship.
Exactly. They saw themselves as proactive, responsible actors, not just, students doing a project.
Okay, so let's unpack how they started. Because that initial struggle, that's often the hardest part. When this team, who were originally the school's student action group, first faced ESG, what was the big block?
Well, it wasn't lack of drive, that's for sure. It was more about clarity. Imagine them looking at these dense corporate ESG reports full of jargon like risk mitigation, supply chain audit.
Or diversity metrics.
Yeah,
not exactly everyday school stuff.
right. And they're thinking, how on earth do we translate that kind of abstract concept into something a student or even a teacher can actually do day to day? The language just felt so corporate, bureaucratic, distant.
So the challenge wasn't just, let's do good things. It was, how do we make the good things we do auditable, repeatable, within their own little world, their school?
You've hit it, exactly. So they refocused, they zero in on their fundamental goal to create a better future by helping more people understand and practice ESG. That subtle shift was key. It moved them away from just trying to copy the corporate world.
And towards building their own standard.
Yes, a standard that was both educational and practical, something replicable.
And their approach was actually quite elegant. They took the E, S, and G pillars, but they didn't just treat them as separate buckets for different projects. They wove them together.
Into a unified framework, which they eventually called re-ESG, sort of like rethinking ESG, re-engaging with it, and that became the heart of their sustainability education work.
That step going from just, say, one-off activities to creating this quantifiable, ongoing educational framework, that seems really significant.
It absolutely is. That's what elevates them, I think, beyond just typical youth volunteering. They built a system.
Okay, let's dive into that ESG model then, because the quantifiable results are what really counter that showmanship critique we talked about. Let's start with E, environmental.
Right. So for the E pillar, they tackled zero food waste at lunchtime. Now, you could just do a poster campaign, right? Finish your food.
The classic approach.
Yeah, but the ACTizens, they understood ESG is about accountability. You need proof. You need data.
So how did they get data on leftover food?
They got serious about it. Two main ways. First, they actually recorded video documentation of the whole food disposal process. But crucially, second, they set up a system where they literally counted the number of plates coming back to the disposal area without any leftovers.
Counting clean plates.
That counting is the game changer. Instead of trying to say, weigh the discarded food, which can be messy and inaccurate.
Time-consuming.
Very. They went for a simple binary outcome. Plate clean, yes or no. That gives you a daily objective data point. Easy to track, easy to scale.
I have to ask, though, Wasn't that a huge amount of work for the students doing the monitoring? Sounds like they basically gave themselves an admin job.
Yeah, it probably was, especially at first, but that's kind of the point with real ESG implementation, isn't it? It requires rigor. You can't just audit good intentions.
You have to audit the result.
Exactly. So by acting like auditors, collecting that daily data, they created verifiable proof of actual behavior change. The success wasn't just less waste, it was, we can tell you exactly how many students finished their plates today.
Okay, that's compelling. Let's shift to S social. This pillar usually covers things like community impact, well-being. How did they make that measurable?
They focused on something pretty relatable: mandatory training, specifically fire drills. You know how those usually go, often met with a collective sigh?
Yeah, tune-out time.
Right. So the students decided to replace the standard, maybe dry instructions, with their own student-made video. And then this is key, they added a mandatory quiz afterward.
Okay. So the metric wasn't just, did we do the drill? But did people actually learn anything? Did the education stick?
Precisely. They wanted to boost interest and, crucially, knowledge retention. By tracking quiz scores, maybe even engagement with the video, they could actually demonstrate a social impact.
Which in this case is a safer, better informed school community.
Exactly, which is the core of the S pillar in that context. They use better content, governed by a quiz, to improve safety outcomes.
All right, and then G, governance. This one always feels like the trickiest to scale down from like a corporate boardroom to a school. Corporate G is all about transparency, leadership, accountability.
Yeah, it's tough. But they found a really clever way to apply it. They focused on the school's own internal politics, the student council.
Interesting. How?
The ACTizen team developed and distributed satisfaction surveys after any event hosted by the student council. This wasn't just casual feedback.
It was structured data collection.
Yes, they framed it as a democratic ESG activity, a way to build in accountability.
So if the student council is like the governing body,
Then the students are like the shareholders. And these surveys, once analyzed, provided a real auditable metric for how transparent and participatory the student council was being.
forcing them to be accountable to their constituents.
Basically, yes, accountable for student satisfaction, just like a board is accountable to shareholders.
So all this data, the plate counts, the quiz scores, the survey results, this all fed into their big ESG project. And they produced an ESG practice guidebook.
That's right. And because it was based on all this tangible data, it wasn't just theoretical. It was like a manual showing, here's how we did it and here's the proof it worked.
That gives it real weight.
Absolutely. It made them a legitimate model case, not just, a successful school club. And they didn't just keep it to themselves, they actively shared the guidebook with other schools via email, making it open source, scalable.
And that drive for scalability, for broader impact, didn't stop there. They actually took this model international, did they, to Mongolia.
Yeah, that's where the model's adaptability really got tested. The sources talk about their initial visit, connecting with students there, even bringing a Mongolian student onto the ACTizen team. But right away, they hit big challenges.
You can't just drop a South Korean school solution into a totally different context.
Exactly. The environment itself was fundamentally different, obviously. Plus, language barriers, different school systems, no existing support network like they had back home.
So how do they handle that? Especially the environmental mismatch. They couldn't run a zero food waste campaign if the overriding issue was something like, well, desertification.
You hit the nail on the head. The core environmental problem was vastly different. Their solution showed real resilience, though. After returning to Korea, they coordinated everything through video calls, really working with the Mongolian team members to tailor solutions.
And that Mongolian environmental context, it's pretty stark, isn't it?
Yeah.
The data they were facing.
It's incredibly sobering. We're not just talking about reducing carbon footprints. The Mongolian Statistical Office data indicates, something like 76.9% of the land is desertified.
Wow, over 3/4.
Yeah, and UNDP reports link that directly to biodiversity loss, food scarcity. For students there, the ESG isn't academic, it's about survival.
So, given that reality, how do they adapt the guidebook?
The Mongolian team member was absolutely crucial. They helped transform the original practice guidebook into an environmental guidebook that focused squarely on local pollution issues in Mongolia and the very real immediate impacts of global environmental change there. They made the E-pillar hyper-relevant.
And what about the social pillar, the S? Did they adapt that too?
They did, yeah. They realized that while, fire safety drills were relevant in Korea, the more pressing social issue identified within the Mongolian schools they partnered with was violence and bullying.
A very different S challenge.
Yeah, a very different and very serious one. So they shifted focus. They collaborated on a joint project, creating posters, visual materials, to specifically address school violence in that context.
That flexibility seems key. Identifying the most urgent local need and using their toolkit to tackle that.
Exactly. That's real adaptability in practice. It shows the framework itself is robust, even if the specific applications change drastically.
So stepping back, what this group of ACTizens really created wasn't just a few good projects. It sounds like they built a whole methodology, a repeatable, auditable way to apply these complex ESG ideas in almost any small community setting.
That's the big picture, I think. Their ultimate goal, reading through the materials, is really to set a new standard. They actually want to formally propose this youth-led ESG practice model more widely to education boards, maybe even government.
Showing it can be done without massive corporate budgets.
Exactly. They've demonstrated that accountability, measurability, governance, these things are achievable at a grassroots level.
And that has huge implications for you listening. Whether you're in a small business, running a nonprofit, leading a team, this isn't just a story about kids. It's a blueprint.
It really is. It shows how to pull ESG down from those lofty corporate reports and make it something actionable, measurable, right where you are. They conducted the abstract metric to daily verifiable proof.
And the key wasn't just the effort they put in, right? It was the measurement.
Absolutely. Their success hinged on deliberately choosing how to measure the impact, counting the plates, using the survey data, quantifying the learning. That auditability, that's what gives their model its power. It goes way beyond just being a youth initiative.
So maybe that's the challenge they leave us with. If you took the E, S, or G framework and applied it to an issue right now in your community, your workplace, what's the metric? What specific objective data point would you track to prove you actually made a difference?
Not just what activity would we do, but what number tells us we succeeded.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
But maybe the one the ACTizens show us we need to be asking.